All right, perfect. So my name is Stan Baines, and I'm a steering committee member of the Canadian Network for Imagination and Creativity, otherwise known to us as CNIC. My partners in this endeavor are on your screen, so wherever the rest of the steering committee is, if you could just give everybody a wave, that would be great, just so everybody can see who's kind of there. That's perfect. So we look forward each month to these moments to be able to share with you deep discussions, ideas, and different ways of looking at how we do things, how we think, or how we can find creativity and imagination in every aspect of life. It isn't our purpose here to find solutions or to solve a problem, but more to look at things from different aspects with different backgrounds, ask questions, and have an open, forward-thinking dialogue and come to a place of collaboration and partnership within our differences. It is our belief that we do this each time that we come together because we feel strongly about our passion for being able to open minds and hear what different people have to say. We want to find creativity and imagination in every corner of what we do. So on behalf of the committee, I want to welcome you here again this evening to our Idea Jam, and we hope you come away feeling engaged, feeling enlightened, and ready to take on the world. So before we fully begin, and I'm almost done, I promise, I'd like to acknowledge that as a resident of Clarence, Rockland, Ontario, which sits just outside of the east end of Ottawa, I am chairing our meeting on traditional unceded land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. I'm thankful for this opportunity to be able to do so, and I'm grateful that although in the past it was full of pain, difficulties, and unfairness, that we've come to a place where we, although can't change the mistakes of the past, we can together make sure that there is no more for the future. As a first-generation Canadian in my family line, it can sometimes be difficult to understand the hardships that people went through in a past I can't relate to. But it is our hope and aspirations to be able to ensure everyone is heard, everyone is loved, everyone is recognized. And let us be thankful for the present that we have, recognize, respect, and never forget the past that brought us to where we are, because our future depends on our understanding of the past. So for this idea, or for this evening's Idea Jam, we are going to be guided through our discussions by Dr. Gillian Judson. Gillian, where are you on the screen? If you can give us a nice big wave somewhere.
Hi.
There we go. Gillian's there. All right. So Gillian is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Education at Simon Fraser University. She teaches education, leadership, and curriculum and instruction programs, and is a member of our CNIC team. The title for this evening's discussions is Engage Imagination, Engage Emotion, the Role of Feeling. So in a few moments, I'm going to hand the discussion over to Gillian so she can take us on the journey for tonight. So we have several different ways that you can participate in the discussions. So Zoom has built-in control, so you're already aware of the chat function. So it's great to see that we've got people from all over the place. So again, thank you for that, right? You can raise your hand. There is a hand raising function, and sometimes if you wave, we'll try and be able to catch that too. So again, don't feel obligated to speak, as sometimes listening and learning is just as engaging, but we do look forward to hearing your ideas afterwards, right? We're also going to be using a Jamboard tonight, which Gillian's going to explain and walk us through, and the link for that is at the top of the chat. So if you go back into the chat and look at the top, you will see that link. So without further ado, let's begin our evening. I'm going to hand it over to you, Gillian.
There we go. I hope everybody can hear me. Thank you so much. It's so nice to see some of my CNIC steering committee here. Hi, Robin. It's nice to see you, and to see my BC friends that we've connected over the years. Hi, David and Victoria. I'm joining you all from the unceded territory of the Kwantlen and the Katzie and the Semiahmoo First Nations people. On a map today, you'd notice it as Surrey. I've found that expanding my understanding of the world through really striving to understand Indigenous pedagogies and Indigenous worldviews is just deepening my appreciation of being here and being allowed to do this tonight. So I want to begin with my role in this. Somebody contacted me this morning and they said, oh, I'm not going to be able to come to your presentation at 4 o'clock. I said, what? I have a presentation at 4 o'clock? I'm not here to give a presentation. Whew. I'm here to provoke conversation and hear others' views, and hopefully I won't speak for more than about 5 minutes. That's my goal. The thing I'd like to talk about today is a topic that doesn't get as much attention as I think it should, and that is feeling. Because no matter the professional context you're in or the personal context you're in, we can't talk about engaging imagination or growing imagination without also talking about feeling. And I know people will take that word and term in different ways, and that's fantastic. There is no imagination without feeling. Like, let's just hold that for a moment. There is no imagination without feeling. And if there's no imagination without feeling, then there's no creativity without feeling, because imagination comes before creativity. So what I want to talk about, and what I'm very curious about, are the feelings of imagination. Also, how imagination feels, and how is imagination feeling, like metaphorically. But feeling is not only kind of ignored, but it's kind of like that F word out there. Not the F word you're all thinking, but it's the F word that people don't want to use in some contexts, because we know that emotions have been disregarded to our own peril in many contexts. Now, something I wasn't going to bring into the conversation tonight, but I would like to, given the world's circumstances, is that sometimes life can overwhelm us. And I know life has been hard on my own family right now. I know that COVID is putting a lot of pressure on us, so we can feel emotionally taxed. So in that space, how do we make space for the feeling imagination? These are my questions. And I want to do something a little bit different tonight. I want to give those who don't want to necessarily speak up, but would like to contribute ideas, an opportunity to do so in an anonymous way. So we have 3 ways for you to share tonight, or as we've already said by our great host, Stan, just sit back and enjoy the ride. So one is you can add comments to the chat, and we'll do our best to draw them out. You can raise your hand either like this, or you can use the reaction button to raise your hand. But in the chat, I put a link, and I'll add it again. It goes to a Jamboard, and a Jamboard, if you've never met one, is a lovely way to add ideas. And so on the Jamboard that's there right now, I've posed some questions. There's a few ways you can add to this Jamboard. On the left side of your screen, there should be a little sticky note icon. If you click that, you can write an idea down, push submit, and it's going to go on the Jamboard. You might want to upload a photo. That's going to go on the Jamboard. So it's a nice way to add your thoughts as the discussion goes along. And if you feel like doodling, flick to page 3 and you can doodle on the Jamboard as well. The kinds of things I want us to think about, and I would like you to think about your personal lives, your professional lives, and where those two meet, because I'm not suggesting those are completely separate. But think about doing something that you love, something where you feel like your imagination is engaged. Are you making? Are you baking? Are you creating? Are you playing a musical instrument? Are you making scones? I don't know what you're doing. What are you doing in that moment, and what are you feeling? Or perhaps you're at work. Consider though what Stephen Asma calls those hot improvisational moments. You're on your toes, you're putting out fires, you're decision making, you're problem solving. What is the emotional experience? How does your body experience that what if possibility in that moment? Or maybe the cold improvisational moment of a 6-meeting long steering committee planning a new launch of a new program. How does it feel in that moment to have imagination? So that's where I'd like us to start. What does imagination feel like? What feelings have you engaged lately with your imagination? And also, perhaps more telling recently, is how can we make space for feeling imagination in an emotionally challenging world? So I would welcome any initial thoughts, reactions, comments. We may or may not use the Jamboard. It's totally up to you.
Well, if no one's going to
Hi,
speak,
Jill.
I will.
Yay.
I had a wonderful experience today. I was in my class teaching art, and I suggested, since there's no exchanging of parties and connections and gatherings between people who are creative, why don't we think of something creative that we can do that comes from us, goes to someone else? And I have a student that works very slowly, very meticulously. And my suggestion was, she said, well, I would have it ready for Valentine's Day. So I saw the Valentine's Day box and all the cards that are in it. And I said, fine, Yours will be ready for Valentine's Day. But if you have it ready before, which is next week, let me know if you don't have it ready before. And I paired up people to do an exchange of a drawing to each other, a card of wishing whatever they want to wish it. So that came from the students saying, I'll have it ready for Valentine's Day. I visualized Valentine's Day box and I got the idea of let's do that exchange for next week. And everybody got really excited about that because we've been together for a year now. I've been blessed to be teaching the same group of people, fortunately, all through this pandemic. And it's been a wonderful experience for my growth, my imagination, and I have great gratitude to have been chosen to lead this group.
That's fantastic. I love the spontaneity of that idea. Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
I didn't know who
Gillian.
I see John.
Hi, Gillian. John Gonzalez up here from St. John's. I defended my dissertation in 2008, and it was about emotions, and well, a big part about emotions and feeling. And this is the first time I've ever heard someone present, although you're not presenting, I realize that, about feelings. It's so wonderful to hear, and that's why I made sure I came tonight. I apologize for missing the others, and I'll try to be back more regularly. And I've worked with Miri on the Atlantic Center for Creativity, so she's been a great colleague, and other folks there. So I just want to say that it is really important, as you said, that we talk about feelings and that because we have them. And one thing that my position was that they're educative, they're intelligent, they teach us things, they can help us understand. And they're not just sort of something to control and make sure you don't listen to them or put aside so you can think, but they're actually things that you need to make sure that you don't allow thinking to stop. And I just, in terms of the creativity or the imagination, my own, I recently decided to retire. And once I made the final decision, that day I had to go out and get some macrame cord. I haven't macrameed since 1980, but for some reason I had to get some macrame cord, and my partner took me all over the place to find Michael's, and they didn't have much. I guess it's not, but I noticed it is coming back more and more. So but I did get some, and I felt in my zone, a zone that I haven't felt in for decades. I'm not sure where that came from, but it bubbled up inside, and I had to listen to it and just follow that feeling that, I just feel I need to macrame. I don't know why, but I've made lots of, plant hangers since then. So, but again, your topic is really important, and I think it's really important to follow it and to listen to our feelings. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John. Two things about what you've said. One, I'd like to pick up on is the macrame piece, and I'm going to call out Lynn Fells, who's here. In my course, I just finished graduate level course on the role of imagination and leadership. We employed Lynn Fells' delightful performative inquiry methodology and pedagogy. And in a final performance, one of my students macrameed for her final project to demonstrate the role of imagination in learning. And this student was really ultimately very surprised by what doing this macrame allowed her to feel, and how it really, the experience of that moment shifted her underlying and overarching thoughts about the topic. The other piece I want to pick up on what you said and then follow up with Fred's comment in the chat is I feel like one of the reasons people try to avoid talking about imagination is because it is inextricably linked to feeling, and we're not good at talking about that. And we're not good at expanding how we understand feeling. I'm not sure if you have anything to say based on your research.
I think I need to just listen for now. But yeah, I think for some reason, yes, we are very hesitant to talk about it, but we are talking about it tonight. You know, and I did talk about it in my dissertation. I talk about it in all the classes I teach. So it is important. I think, you know, we are talking, although it's been pushed aside. And I think it's also a gendered issue because feelings are, have been historically associated with women. So women's ways of knowing, of being, and although, women aren't clearly the only people to have feelings, but for some reason, those emotions, the fact that we are emotional beings is somehow pushed aside and is considered unimportant. So I try to push back at that and just say for sometimes we're told, in the classroom, leave your feelings at the door,
right.
Leave your emotions at the door. My response is, well, why? Who's going to pick them up? Will they be there when I come out? So my feelings, I bring my feelings into the classroom. I am a feeling person. I am an emotional human being.
Yeah.
That's almost like it's bizarre to say that because of course I'm emotional if I'm a human being. So I think just keep talking about it. Yeah. You don't look like a group of people that will be silent. So I think just keep pushing back and keep talking and keep feeling.
Well, I think that's the most horrific advice I've ever heard is leave your emotions at the door. I don't think there's any learning whatsoever without emotion. And I wanted to pick up on a couple of things. Fred, you mentioned this important feature of social emotional learning. And I did mention that life's been hard on our family lately. So socially and emotionally, do I have capacity outside of my worry or concern to be imaginative in X, Y, or Z ways? So that's one aspect. But I'm also here tonight to say that when I'm imaginatively engaged in my research on leadership, I have strong emotional connections to the topic of leadership. So I'm really interested in how is your imagination at play? What were you feeling about that macrame? So beyond just social emotional learning and feelings, we have to expand the idea that human beings have strong emotional connections to subject matter. And in our professional lives, I'm sure that's the case. I've said too much. Who's up next, Stan, in our conversation?
Actually, we've got a couple of things. Thank you for throwing it back here for a second. The Jamboard is lighting up. So I just want to remind people that there are 3 pages. So if you've run out of space on the first page, there's a button at the top that allows you to move on to the next pages. But it's been really interesting to sort of see some of the comments in here, right? Like I'll just read a couple, like deep feelings are positive, in essence, love. Right? Like I feel open. It feels like charged up and I light up like a Christmas tree. It pulls my body. I feel pulled. So it's very fascinating, right? I very much agree with John. It's very fascinating to touch on this because we sometimes tend to try and compartmentalize things, right? Right? If you're imaginative like that paints a picture of some level of creativity that may just kind of be set in a place, but all being creative, being imaginative, it has to pull from an emotional place. Take a look at some of the greatest pictures ever painted, and just through even the pain, right? The pain that was done, or when you listen to certain music where you can feel that there's an emotion attached to this. So the fact that we're discussing this tonight and to see these comments coming through and to hear people talking, this drives an element within you to go, yeah, this is actually touching me in a very special place. And even like I said, I've struggled before in the past with where am I creative or where am I imaginative? Well, in every aspect of what you do, you have to find some level of creativity. How are you going to manage 20 meetings? How are you going to manage that angry person when you've barely come into work at 7 o'clock and somebody all of a sudden wants to kind of offset your day? Well, you have to be creative and imaginative. And for those of us that work within the school system, we know what that's like. You've come in, you've got a whole idea, and then you might have some administrator or some fellow coworker that just, just may not be where you are. Well, you have to be creative in how you're going to do that. So it's great that we're talking about this tonight. So I'm hoping we can keep the conversation going. So David, I'm going to throw it over to you and let you have the next comment.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, excuse me while I have a fidgety pug that's entertaining my imagination at the moment. The thing I'd like to bring in is it was the social emotional comment or tag that twigged me, is that I do hear that conversation going on in schools, but it's about how the conversations go on is how do we build the esteem or self-confidence of students, how they can be in the classroom and feel safe. And that's all an important part. But as a teacher, the part that of feeling an emotion that for me isn't necessarily about just being confident or be feeling good about yourself while you're sitting in your seat learning, that the emotions can help really facilitate learning when something's engaged. And I'll give you an example. When I was teaching learning in depth, I had a student that really wanted to study the Holocaust. And when we got into it, it was about racism. That was what she didn't understand, how people can be racist and bigoted and so forth. And it came from a place of anger and frustration. It wasn't unhealthy for her to go that way, because she really dug into the topic. She went deep into the past and looked at all the things that are going in present, and it really enhanced her ability to learn and understand and research about racism and bigotry and so forth. So for me, the conversation around emotion and learning is about how do we understand that as people who come, emotion being kind of almost the first intelligence that we have, how do we hook that up into the kind of academic learning that we do in schools? So I think we shouldn't be afraid about the range of emotions as to why stuff. Obviously, we look at the good stuff, but I think we should understand that a lot of really famous people got into their research, like for diabetes and so forth, because of other emotions other than sort of joy, and happiness. So it's what Gillian's talked about. It's that relationship, that how does tapping into emotion really enhance learning? That's my comment. So.
Thanks, David. I'm not sure about the order here, but should we go to Trevor? Sounds good.
Yep, Trevor's next.
Yeah, I just want to kind of build on what he just said there. I get to do a lot of creative exercises with students of all ages, and one thing I always a lot of songwriting or sometimes scene writing or comedy writing or things like that. But one thing I always do is I talk about the old saying, you write what you know, but it's actually much better to write what you feel, because if you feel something, you already know about it, but you don't only know about it, you have direction with it if you feel strongly about something, because emotion is based on the motion, right? It's motion. Emotion is a direction. That's what emotions give you, is somewhere to go and a drive to do something. So I think I do all the time is get them to write 2 lists of things, things you like, love, and then another list of things that bug you or annoy you. Like talking with David, is like they're both drivers, right? They're both big drivers. And it's interesting because some students can only write 1 list. Like they'll just say, no, I can think, and I said, that's fine. You can, and others will write just things that bug them, and they'll have these massive lists. And those are the ones I know are going to be comedians, because they're usually the people who are irritated but want to get it out. But it doesn't really matter which emotion. It's a drive. I'll just one very quick other anecdote. So I was doing one songwriting workshop. I showed up a class, and the students came in, and there was one kid at the front, and he was like, do we have to write songs about love? I said, no, you don't have to write songs about love. We don't have to write songs about love, guys. I thought we'd have to write songs about love and relationships. But no, you write a song about anything you would like. What do you like? What do you want to write a song about? He says, chairs. Could I write a song about chairs? I said, yeah, damn right you can write a song about chairs. You're going to write a song about chairs. What do you like about chairs? What excites you about chairs? So I try to go, what excites you? What is the thing I always tell students, when you feel something, you don't have to rationalize. You don't have to know why you feel a thing. That gets in your way. You can that's the whole point of making the thing is almost, that's the first step in figuring out why. You don't need to stop the thinking. It's hard because they've been trained their whole lives to, I need to figure out why I feel about this thing. No, you don't. Just make the thing. And that's going to help you figure out why you feel about this thing. That comes last, if at all. Sometimes people make things and they never know why they made them, right? And that's sometimes some of the better things too. Okay, I'm going to stop because I'll ramble.
That's
on.
fantastic. Thank you, Trevor. Trevor, I'm reminded of a quote that I really wanted to bring out. And another thanks call to Lynn. If we could see her, she'd be blushing. But this book she recommended, I read with my students, Stephen Nashmanovich book, Free Play, Improvisation in Art and Life.
Yeah.
But the question is, where does the play of your imagination come from?
Mm-hmm.
Where does it come from? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I love that, Trevor, what I'm hearing from you is wherever it comes from, nurture it, amplify it. And somebody said on the Jamboard, how do we make space for it for others? We need to model it, which is scary. You got to be vulnerable. And that can be very powerful and valuable, but also terrifying at the same time. I added to the chat also some of these very poetic exemplifications of what imagination feels like. It feels like water flowing over rocks or ebbing and flowing like the ocean, beckoning me when it's low tide and running me back to the shoreline when I have stepped to the edge of beyond. Wow. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to their additions to the Jamboard, but now would be a great time for that.
I think we spend a lot of time, and then I'm going to move to Fred. I think we spend a lot of time running from our emotions. We know this, right? We've been told so much as grown-ups to keep them under control. How freeing. So as frustrating it is for those of us that are parents, when, you take your young children out and when they don't want to do something, they just cry and go on bad, right in public. They have no thought about any of that stuff. Sit back and think for a moment how freeing it would be in some instances if you could just do that. If you could just go into your office and your boss demands that you get this paperwork done and you just stamp your feet around and just go on. It's those types of emotions that in that moment where things drive, and taking a look through the Jamboard and through the chats, it's very interesting what really does drive us and what can get us to that point. And just, as I'm listening to this, listening about the water go over, it's very fascinating. Yeah, to just think of a small child having a fit over what their mind is thinking is some level of unfairness, but it's that bigger picture that they see that sometimes as adults we don't, because we spend a lot of time keeping our emotions under control. But yet our emotions have so much about what we want to do, how we need to do it, and so on. So this has been so far a very fascinating journey. So Fred, go ahead.
I was just thinking of when we look at evaluating music or art, it's always about the emotional content and what it either shows about the artists themselves or what it evokes in the audience. Those are tools that we use to measure it. And if we can't connect to the emotions of what we're doing, then it's lifeless. And everyone talks about the reality of singers on a song like The Voice and how it was the emotional basis of their expression that made it work. So I was thinking it's a very difficult thing to do, but somehow we use it as an evaluative tool.
And not to put Fred on the spot here, but Fred's a super math teacher. I don't know if you've shared that in previous sessions. And I feel like, Fred, just in our interactions and the way I know that you've shared with me and your blogs for Imagine Ed, how you teach math, you are emotionally connecting with the subject matter and trying to convey that same emotional connection with students. So you are very much tapping into feeling when you're teaching mathematics. And I think for some people, they would find that an odd combination, but not you, I don't think.
No, it's a natural combination. And when we weave stories,
Right.
they're always emotionally based and what they spur in other people.
Exactly. Thanks, Fred. Jane. Oh, Jane, I lost Jane.
Jane's there, but I think, Jane, you're still muted.
Sorry about that.
There you are.
I'm there. I wanted to respond a little bit to, I think it was Fred who talked about reflection. When I work with drama and dance teachers or students, I think I coined it. It might be out there and I'm just ignorant, but I use the term meta-affective. And I relate it to metacognitive with teachers, particularly that are in Ontario, the curriculum is creative process and critical thinking. And so we look at in the critical thinking that the wheel that's there can go all over the place. It's a wheel that it can go any which way. But the creative process is the same. And I think a lot of the times what we give students in drama and dance is an opportunity to think about their feeling, to actually look at it, why, how, respond to it. So I found that using that term really helped educators to think about why we look at cognition, thinking as important, and to think about our thinking, but not to do the same thing with how we're feeling as we're working together. There was one other thing I wanted to say. I think I said this at the very first CNIC I ever came to, where it was very, well, they're all inspirational, but I think that we have to look at how we have responsibility to create environments that allow people to feel comfortable. But even when those are created, it's almost impossible to control it because it's so much learning that's going on. And it's really a lot of learning going on right now as we open wide, explore wide all the voices we've never heard, trying to get voices that have been not used and not spoken, and encouraging that, and also helping the really talkative like myself to stop and listen and not, there's all that regulation of emotion because we're working in groups. So learning independently and learning with groups and with other people inevitably has to involve that analysis of feelings and respect and listening and owning. But the last time I was in CNIC and I tried to share something, I cried, and I was really quite embarrassed, and I was ashamed for feeling that way. But I remember we talk about being vulnerable, but being vulnerable is really hard, and it's not so simple. And if it explodes out of us when we're not expecting it, then it's particularly vulnerable, because we weren't just taking a risk to share something came out of us that we didn't pre-plan or expect. So I don't know what I just said, but those all the things I've been thinking about, and I'll stop now.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes I go into a conversation and I've got it together, and then there's a little crack in my little box and the emotion burst out of it, and the glass is shattered. But I appreciate your contributions. Thank you, Jane, so much. I'm not sure who has her hand up, but I wanted to call on Lynn if you're willing to talk. I mean, I made that statement, there's no imagination without feeling, and there's no separation of the feeling from the body. So there's no imagining without the body's full participation. How do we feel about that?
I just think that, as everyone has been saying, it's so important to recognize the wholeness of the body, feeling, breath. We're all it's all interconnected. So it's curious, for anyone to say, leave your feelings at the door, because the feelings do enter in, and you can see it in the body language. And, you think of Celeste Snowburn, who say, okay, everyone take a deep breath, right? Enter in, be present. So I always think about permission and invitation. And my feelings are that our students are hungry, just as we're hungry, to reimagine how we're being asked to perform in the multiple worlds that we're in. And feelings are very much connected to that in terms of resistance. So right now I'm paying a lot of attention to resistance, and whether that's a resistance in the body or resistance in the feeling or resistance in, wow, there's no way I'm going to do that. That resistance is the place to inquire, because we're going to learn a lot there.
Thank you, Lynn. I hear what you're saying, and it worries me more that it's going to be hard to open up conversations about feeling and the value of feeling, when I think we are now more than ever detached from our own body and our awareness of it and presence in our own bodies. Maybe that's just my own feeling, but I worry that it's one step to talk about feeling. It's another step further to have people acknowledge the importance of the body in our fulfilled and fulsome life. Susanna? Or Lynn, were you going to reply to that?
I was just going to say that how can we not? And we have been. I mean, Celeste's work has been around for a long time. Dance has been around for a long time. The question to ask is, why are we in a structure that tries to ignore feeling and body?
Yeah.
And what's the advantage to who for that? And once one goes into the academic worlds, who are we performing for and by? Right? So that's where expectations, what you think you're supposed to do. And my greatest joy has been what Davis and Samaro talk about, is enlarging the space of the possible, saying, all right, that's one way of doing it, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And that's been a lot of fun for those of us in arts education at Simon Fraser.
Thank you, Lynn. Susanna, and then Paul.
Hi, thank you, Gillian. So I've been listening to everything. I kind of got stuck on one point that John made earlier about emotions and feeling being very gendered. And I've been teaching, and I'm going to tie this back to what Lynn said in a moment. I've been teaching a course in ethical issues in education, where a major project is where students need to make an ethical change in their own lives. So there's a lot of introspection, a lot of reflection and personal inquiry, and I've really noticed how I'm almost too scared to say this, but I've been thinking of ways to make it more invitational for to make it less gendered. Let me put it that way. So more inviting for the male members of our group to feel. To be able to feel in ways where they feel safe, respected. Of course, there's that invitation. I love what you say, Lynn, about invitation and permission and vulnerability, and also how it's all connected. I've been thinking a lot in terms of how to bring this all together in ways that, within arts education and outside of arts education as well. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or responses. It's more of a question. It's how do we make it less gendered? How do we make it inviting across all genders?
I'll try to respond a little bit. Sorry. John here. I'll try to respond just a little bit. For me, a way that we can make spaces more inviting, perhaps, is to stop using terms like safe space and to acknowledge that our spaces, there are no safe spaces, that we are always taking risks. And I'm sorry I didn't. I think it was Jane that talked about crying and then feeling guilty, feeling that she did something wrong or embarrassed, and Gillian talked about the glass or the wall kind of breaking open. So I think we just need to acknowledge that we feel very vulnerable and very scared, and Susanna, you just hesitate even to say what you were going to say, which in this space is kind of it's almost shocking, right? But it's true. I mean, this space is not safe either. It's beautiful, but it's but we're always but there are risks, and just to acknowledge the risks that we're taking, and I guess as well to support, like if we're going to extend an invitation, to be able to support a person in responding to that situation, to that invitation rather, as much as possible.
Paul, did you want to add something to the discussion? By all means, sir.
Why, thank you. I'm just, I'm finding so much, having so many imaginative puppies in relationship to the thread that's built. When I'm putting together the concepts of feelings, imagination, body, engender, safety, risk, permission versus invitation, in a culture of, well, we're all imbued in a culture of tremendous change, and a system that's claiming to be able to adapt to that change. Yeah, and I'm really observing teachers right now. I'm trying to be very sensitive to my colleagues, and I'm seeing increasing frustration and resentment by being told they're collaborating when they're not. They're agents of a system, but they're not really involved in designing the system. And then they're really trying to do all what's right by kids, and where my earlier comments in the threads were about teachers being on the brink and freezing from imagination. They're being invited to participate in a pseudo collaboration and system change, while there's an underlying message. The deeper patterns are saying, you really don't have permission to imagine. We're really not going to listen to you. We're not going to make changes that involve you. And so just do the stuff on the surface, trim the hedges and stuff, but we're really not looking at what's happening deeper. And so I'm seeing a increasingly ossified and fragile faculty. And I think we're still working hard to protect the kids from these realities, and we're maintaining the illusion. Yeah, we're being creative. Sure, let's imagine together. But when you see the kids with such, and manifest in the kids of tremendous gender confusion and issues of authority and power, which have always been there with kids and teens. I work with teens. And then you're mentioning the masculine and feminine relationship to the teachers or adults, of who's feeling safe to have permission to imagine or to feel, or to commit an idea to paper instead of just leaving it in their heads. I'm finding it on my faculty more willingness to imagine among the male teachers, and more resistance among the female teachers, if there is a gender thing there. So I'm not sure how much in this context, and educators, I mean, the men that happen to teach high school tend to be more, have more empathy than the general pop anyways, general pop of men, I suspect, and more willing to imagine. But right now, right across the field, there's a resistance to putting your imagination out there. So as I'm investigating system change through imagination and finding out where are the pedagogies of imagination lie? I'm finding it fascinating how these key words just keep popping up in that conversation. That's all for now.
Thank you, Paul. There's a lot to process there. Mary.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I'm just, obviously it's just a really, really important topic and so fundamental to what we do as teachers, and wanting to, get to that place where young people and all ages that we work with address that well of feeling that they have, and use that as the basis of the work they do and the source of imagination. But I go back to that whole thing about being human and being, I always tell my students they're critters. I said, you're just actually an animal. and you have senses. You have, you hear and you taste and you touch. And all the time you're picking up this information. And I think one of the things that I always try to concentrate on with my students is learning through their senses. Like, be aware of what you're hearing, be aware of what you see, what you touch, and all those things. And of course, what that does is create feelings. It's like it's all sort of fundamental to how we begin to develop a sort of sense of what we're doing. And so I take it right back to what we are as a sensory creature, really. And our head is just like eyes and ears and taste, and it's all happening. And to really, I think, educate young people and all of us really to be more aware of our surroundings and the senses that we have. And when we pick up information, we get a sensation from it. It's like, oh, that's I love that sound, or I love that image. And again, as you say, Gillian, that wonderful connection to the imagination. I mean, that begins to fuel the imagination, and from that we get the creative acts and so on that we see. So I just kind of wanted to mention that piece about sensory awareness and sensory learning, and how I find as an art educator, it's so basic to some of the things that I do with my students, to just get them in the moment, make them more present, and to learn more about who they are, and use those things that they have to gain a sense of feeling and a deeper understanding.
Thank you, Mary. Absolutely hear you. Not being specifically an art educator myself, I love hearing that, because I certainly heard nothing about body and feeling when I was training to be a French and geography teacher. It didn't come up. Robin.
I just like to sort of follow up on what Mary said and add to it. And what you said, Mary, reminded me of a grade 6 class that I was teaching today. I only get to drop in on classes for a few hours at a time. And this is a big day, like the last couple of days before the holiday break. There's just all kinds of emotions happening on these days. And we were working on a project which was a choice-based project. Students were given the chance to explore some tools and techniques and then decide what they want to do with them. And they had never had this opportunity in an art space before. And so they were floundering a little bit. And there was a lot of emotion and a lot of feeling in the room. And we stopped to talk about those feelings and emotions. And the materials brought the emotions, and the processes brought the emotions and the feelings, and the experiments, and all aspects of that hour that I was in there was heavily charged with emotion and feeling, and stopping to say, how do you feel? How does this feel? Is that okay? Does anybody else feel like that? Had a huge impact on the progress of the rest of that hour. It went from an environment of stress and concern to one of experimentation and freedom and joy. And it was pretty transformative. It was really remarkable.
Thank you, Robin. That's a powerful lived experience and very, very recent. Very recent. Anne.
Thank you. I want to go back to some earlier comments. Fred was talking as a math teacher, and Gillian, you were talking about how he uses his imagination a lot with the kids. And there was a comment made afterwards that some people would find that an odd combination. And I guess I kind of want to challenge this group, because there's a lot of arts people here. And Fred, I'm a math person as well. And there is as much imagination in mathematics or the sciences or as in the arts, and yet most of the people here are arts people, I think, from what I've heard so far. And I think it's really important to recognize that. And when we're talking about imagination, then we're talking about how imagination is or your feelings and should be left at the door. And you know, why are we in a world that doesn't appreciate imagination? And yet I kind of feel, and maybe I'm wrong, but I kind of feel like there's imagination, creativity, feelings are associated with the arts, but not with the sciences. And maybe we need to all use our imagination a bit more to realize that just because we're not a science person doesn't mean that there's not a lot of passion, a lot of imagination, a lot of creativity happening there, because I'm sure that most of the inventions that the you know, technological inventions that we have required somebody with a heck of a lot of imagination and creativity.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that up because it's sort of been floating around in my brain since you know, since Fred was talking.
No, I think that is one of the misconceptions, right? I couldn't agree with you more. It's ridiculous to like, it's just a misconception. There are many misconceptions, and some of my recent work is to bring imagination back down to earth and not just the special possession of artists or children. Indeed, it is very much required in a Vygotskian sense in all of those, all of our practices as human beings. And so this takes, and I agree with you, it just takes some unpacking and unlearning to get imagination in the mouths of more people. We're preaching to the choir here, I think, but I'm not an artist and I'm not a scientist, somewhere in the middle, I guess. And I'm working to sort of address some of those misconceptions for sure. I am aware of the time. I know we promised to create really interactive sessions, and we also always promise to complete our sessions within an hour. So did anybody want to have a final comment for this particular idea jam, which I've found to be quite fun? Could I do a really crude vote? Did anybody enjoy having the Jamboard as a part of a way we could share? Did anybody enjoy that additional way to share, maybe even anonymously? There's never pressure to do it, but it's an additional way to do it. And now it's a pretty spectacular artifact from our conversation. Jane, are you voting for Jamboard, or do you have a comment?
Voting for Jamboard.
Awesome. Well, it was an experiment, we got to try. And what's funny is I am all about, oh, we got to try new things. You got to play, be imaginative. And I was sweating buckets that it wouldn't work. So I'm glad it worked well today. I'm going to hand it back over to Stan, but I feel as the host, not the host, but as sort of the facilitator tonight, I just feel so grateful for everybody bringing all of their emotions, all of their feelings, and just being willing to talk about something that we don't talk about enough. And I think we need to use this F word more often. That's all I have to say. Peace out.
That is absolutely amazing. One of the things I really do enjoy about this, and it's nice too, that as we continue to get to know each other, so John did make a point there, safe spaces are one of those odd things that we just say, but we don't kind of put a lot of thought into it. But of course, if you think about it, we're kind of getting together as different people from around the world. We don't know each other. And even within our own scenic group, a lot of us have not physically been able to meet because we are remote to each other. But as we continue to walk down this journey, and for those of us that have been doing this for quite some time, you start to really see that you start to connect with people, right? That you become more comfortable. And even if you're happy to just listen, one of the things that is highlighted to me out of all of this evening is that, yeah, having your emotions in what you do is an important part sometimes of who you are, right? And without that, then it's just too dry. So this was very eye-opening tonight. So thank you, Gillian, for leading us on that, because I think now moving forward, we're going to be much more aware of that and going to engage that within some of our further discussions. So that's been absolutely amazing, because it is part of our shared mission here to create those open discussions, enhance creative thinking, explore our imagination, and having this dedicated time to talk and to be able to share now our emotions and how we feel and what we think about that. Because that way, then, as we're adding it, we're adding our personal opinion, thought, and heart to whatever it is that we're talking about. And considering we've been doing this now for over a year, and if you watch how we are, we're all sitting on another Zoom meeting, but what we're aiming to do and what we've done more so tonight is create that human connection with each of you. So we really are glad as the committee and on behalf of Gillian and everybody else that you've joined us this evening. So we thank you very much for that. And we look forward, as with each idea jam, to continue the discussion moving from one to the next, right? So with that, our next idea jam will be on January 20th, 2022. So it'll be our first one of the new year. And that will be hosted by Mary Blatherwick. So we really do hope that you're going to be able to join us again. And with that, we hope that as we close out the evening, that you had a great time tonight, that we've helped you enhance a little bit more, you've enhanced us a little bit more, and that you have a Merry Christmas, a safe and happy holidays, time with your friends and family, and we look forward to seeing you all again in the new year. And we thank you again with open hearts and open minds for joining us on our journey for the 2021 year. So we look forward to seeing you again next year, everybody. So have a great night. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you again next year.